All right. Dads, I have a question for you. Do you stink? It's okay to smell yourself. Yeah, some of us, I hope you do. I hope you do. Instead of being rooted in a particular text this morning, I took more of a theme approach. This is not expository, but it's more of a look at the whole Bible and as a whole. And I think it forces fathers to come face to face with an issue and a role that we need to be serious about. And to start off with, we will be in 1 Timothy. That's 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. The text says this: "He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey. For if a man cannot manage his household, how can he take care of God's church?" Now, I want to pause there for a second and have y'all put yourself in a role. How many of y'all have served on a committee of any time? It doesn't matter what kind. Any small group of people that's intended to look, search, do something for a company. Some of you have been there. Well, I want everybody to put themselves in that situation right now. You're a group of people hiring a pastor to come into this church, and your responsibility is to see if he will do a good job pastoring. So, let me read you a whole scenario here. The pastor search team meets with a sense of anticipation. So that's y'all. You're anticipated about this gentleman that's coming in, and there's a sense of excitement to interview this potential pastoral candidate. What will this prospect shepherd have to say? That's what everybody's really got on their mind. And how does this shepherd view the task of ministry at hand? The potential shepherd walks into a room and sits down, and the shepherd begins to talk, and he says, "I want to be clear about a few things. I'm going to give you a well-prepared, excellently delivered sermon on a consistent basis. That's my responsibility. I'm going to do it. But I also want to be clear. I don't want too much to be expected of me. I have a hard time when I have too much to do, and I don't really like getting my hands dirty or messy with issues. I want to leave that to the people. So what I want to do is come preach my sermon and just leave all the responsibility to you all and see how things kind of shake out. I'll be a nice guy. I will slap backs. I will shake hands. I will eat apple pies with the ladies who fix them. I will do all of those things, but I really don't want to be involved in confronting anyone. I don't want to be involved in any conflict or any other things that you need to know about me. Is you need to know this: I do not like making decisions. So I'm going to leave all that stuff to the other people." Now, if you can imagine, it should be that this committee of people, this group of people at this moment probably sank down their seats a little bit and hung their heads low and go, "What is going on?" That is not a shepherd. And they're probably asking the question, what kind of shepherd is this? And my answer to that would be as a very unfaithful one. So the Bible talks about shepherds from the very beginning, and he uses God himself as he is the great shepherd. And that leads into God calling other people, prophets and kings, to shepherd his people. And then ultimately the good shepherd came, Jesus Christ, and paid his life, and that being the ultimate shepherd for us and gave us such a great example. And then God provides churches, and he uses shepherds or pastors to guide these churches throughout history. The Bible is also consistent in what it takes to be an unfaithful servant, unfaithful shepherd. I mean, it's very consistent in the showing you what it looks like, but it's also consistent in showing what it means to be unfaithful. And you see this in Ezekiel 34, 1 through 10. And God says that he took all the shepherds of Israel, and he was against them. And here's the reason. It was really simple. There's a lot of text there, but they neglected the flock. They neglected to take care of the people that God had given them. They failed to protect. They failed to take care of their people. And so, more or less, they were kind of conceited, and they were selfish, and they wanted to focus on themselves. Now, what does this have to do with dads? Everything. Has everything to do with dads. See, the first thing we need to ask ourselves as fathers is, do we stink? I mean, do you really stink? And I want to show you what I mean by this. William Perkins, he's a Puritan, he said that the family and the Christian household is a little church. Lewis Bailey followed that up in the 1600s. He said, what a preacher is in the pulpit, the father is in the home. And we kind of come to this idea of family and church and that shepherding idea together through 1 Timothy chapter 5 when he says, we see the family imagery is used to explain relationships. Do not rebuke older men harshly, but exhort him as if they were your father. Treat younger men as your brothers, older women as your mothers, and younger women as sisters with absolute purity. See, this imagery going on is the pastors and shepherds, they're called to lead their household. They're called to lead the church. But for individuals, for fathers, they're called to lead their house. And it's very interesting. If you look at the qualifications for a pastor or a shepherd, we read it in 1 Timothy, and it goes like this. The qualification says, if he cannot manage his little flock, his family, he must be dismissed from the flock of God as a shepherd. Now, this is not saying that the church and the family are the same thing, because they're not. They're different. But the principles are the same. The management and how you take on this role as a shepherd is the same thing. See, men, I want you to understand something. God has called you to be a shepherd, to pastor your family. It's not a choice. The only issue is, are we going to be faithful or are we going to be unfaithful? God says that you as a shepherd of your family will be held accountable. And I think we need to remember that because he's talking to you men. You're going to be held accountable for raising and guiding your sheep, guiding your flock. So here's the question. How are you doing pastoring? How are you doing pastoring your family? How are you doing shepherding? Do you stink? You ought to. Because shepherding is a messy job. And I think we struggle that as men because we grew up in, I think we used to have one in the down here in the hallway, maybe still there. But it had a picture of Jesus. And it's always such a nice picture of Jesus. And as a matter of fact, he looks like he just got manicured nails and he has the long flowing hair. When did we put that up there for us? Let's see here. He should, yep. See, that's the picture I'm talking about. And you look at him, he doesn't look like he's clean. He has the perfect hair and he's not dirty. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the lamb, I think it's smiling back at Jesus. I mean, it's such a pretty picture. And that's the picture we have of a shepherd. I mean, y'all know that's what you thought of when you think of shepherds, right? It's what everybody does. But let me enlighten you for a minute. In ancient Eastern culture, they knew what a shepherd was and what it wasn't. Shepherds were rugged. Shepherds bore as their mark the scars of defending their flock. Shepherds were warriors for the flock. They spent time with the flock, and they smelled like the flock. Their staffs were stained with blood, and their skin was rugged like leather. A shepherd led, fed, and fought for his flock. It was hard work. It was dirty work. It was a messy job, and it was smelly. Well, to be honest, I guess not all shepherds, though, were dirty. See, there were some shepherds that come in, and they were hired to do the job, and they weren't real good at it because they were self-serving. They looked at the job as, well, it's a job. So they're just going to come in, do what they have to, but they were more worried about what they can get out of it. They wasn't worried about what they have to do and the love or anything like that. You know, and to be honest, I think we have far too many fathers that take on that same role. They like the idea of playing father. They like the idea of being dad. They like the idea of being a faithful husband. But when it comes down to it, they just dump all the responsibility off, hand it off to somebody else, hand it off to the wife, and ask them to raise their children. And they convince themselves that it's okay. That's the sad part. They convince themselves that it's okay just to have the wife to take care of all the men, those types of things, because that's what she does. I mean, their attitude, I think, sometimes is, well, I earn the paycheck, after all, and I deserve some recreation time, and I'm just too tired to deal with things when I come home. And so I leave that stuff to her. See, church, what we need fathers who stink because they're in the trenches with their family. They're defending their flock. They're fighting for them. They're taking care of what God gave them because it's their flock. It's nobody else's flock. And every person in here has a flock of people that God has given to them. And none of them's perfect. They all have tons of problems. So it's a dirty job. See, fathers, we need fathers that are going to get in the trenches. They're going to get their hands dirty. There's no self-pity. They realize it's a tough job, and they have no clue how to do it because there's no blueprint out there that says this is how you do it. You read your Bible and you figure it out. But what we need to do is, because when life gets tough, we need to look ourselves in the mirror and say, that's why I'm here. I'm here to face down the enemy. I'm here to deal with the difficulties. I'm here to snatch my flock away from danger. I'm here. I will gladly bear the marks of protection of those God has given me. And honestly, now more than ever, now more than any other point in history, can we see that we have a humongous task ahead of us. Do you stink? Are you willing to get dirty? See, what we see now is the enemy is hiding everywhere. It's in your phones. It's when you walk down the street. It's in your own household. It's with your friends. He's everywhere. See, and it's not just enough, dads, to stand up and fight. We have to lead. And that seems to be the hard part for dads sometimes. They like the idea of fighting. They like that idea, but they don't like the idea of leading. And shepherds lead. One of the greatest comforts in the Bible is the fact that God reveals himself as a shepherd. In Psalm 23:1, he says, the Lord is my shepherd. We could say it like this: the Lord is my pasture, I shall not want. And as we study the rest of the psalm, it says that we will lack for nothing because our shepherd leads us, provides for us, feeds us, guides us, protects us. See, a shepherd leads and has the authority and will be held accountable for that authority. And that's key, because we have a tendency to let that authority go to our head sometimes. But we see in 1 Peter chapter 5 that pastors, shepherds, and those who shepherd the flock of God are called to the responsibility of exercising oversight. That means you're the head of your household. They are not to do it in a way that disregards the flock. They're not to lead in a way that shoves the flock aside and puts their personal needs first. They're to do it in a way that puts the gospel ahead of everything. Lead like Jesus Christ did. Men are to lead as if they are a shepherd. See, it's not enough to earn a paycheck. It's not enough to send your kids to college. It's not enough to be a nice guy. It's not enough to provide. Those are all secondary issues, to be honest. So I think in the church today, we've come to a point in Christianity where having manners and being a nice guy that's Christianity. That's being like Christ. But I have a problem with that, because I don't think a nice guy would be the one to battle for his family and to lead it through hardships and to stick with it. A nice guy who will not step in front of his family and lead has abandoned his post. And now we have far too many fathers abandoning their post and giving it off to the next generation, or the generation behind them, and saying, Dad, Mom, can you raise them? Because I can't. Don't abandon your post. And I know some of you are thinking, well, I don't have kids anymore. Mine are grown up. Well, good. You're grandparents now, so you still have a job to do. You're an uncle. Good. You have a job to do. We have a job to do. Everybody in this church has a job to do, because we're talking about heaven and hell. We're talking about what separates eternity. Which way do you let your kids go? See, sometimes to be a shepherd in your family means that there have to be times where you stand up and you battle and you say no. You have to defend what you know God wants. Husbands and fathers are the heads of their homes. Ephesians 5 explains it in the terms of the gospel. And it's such a beautiful picture if you read that whole chapter. But basically it's a call to be like Christ. That's how you should treat your family. Sacrifice for them, love them. I was talking to this individual a few years ago, this young man, and we were leading up to wedding counseling, and what we were talking about is leading your family. And we get to the point where, that comes up, and he goes, oh, I'm right with you. I've got this. He goes, when I get married, well, if I want to go golfing, if I want to go fishing, she's not telling me what to do. I'll do what I want to do. I'm the man. I was like, oh, man, you're in for a load of hurt. That's not what that's talking about. But unfortunately, that's what we hear. I'm the head of the house. I'll do what I want to do. See, Ephesians explains headship in the terms of the gospel, and he says, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. The focus is self-sacrificial responsibility, not personal privilege. Guys, our focus should be solely 100% on teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ to our kids, to shepherding our families with the gospel. We should be the people in our families that is constantly pointing back at the gospel and say, that matters above everything. That's the truth. It ought to be so obvious in your family that no matter what's going on, they see dad loves the gospel of Jesus Christ. Matter of fact, it should permeate every trip to the ballpark, the way you spend your money, the way you spend your time, the way you order your life, the way you organize your household. Everything should point back to the gospel of Jesus Christ. But far too often it points back to busyness and money and things that we want and possessions and all those stuff. And we miss giving the kids the best thing we can possibly give them. Teaching them about the gospel. I want to show you something. Y'all have seen that stat up there for a while now. Fewer than 48% of young adults agree that raising children in a religious community is important to provide a moral foundation. Let me say that again. 48% young adults agree that raising children in a religious community is important to provide a moral foundation. A majority, 53% of young adults, say this is not the case. In contrast, more than 3/4, 76% of seniors say bringing children up in religion is a crucial instill good values with them. Here it is. Research says that 3 out of every 5 young Christians, that's 59, it was like 59 point something, so I rounded up, discontinue going to church permanently or for an extended period of time after the age of 15. So that means at the age of 15, 60% of them, and this is the low side, 60% abandon the church, abandon God, and they move on. If that doesn't make you go, oh, you need to check your heart. Because that means 60% of the kids that are sitting here today will leave this church at the age of 15 and so on. I mean, it'll be in there somewhere. And 60% of them won't be coming back to the church for years and years. We're talking about heaven and hell. And guys, this was the low stat. I picked the lowest one I could find. There were some that went up to 83%. And it just depends on where you looked at and what angle you went. But here's what I noticed. If you back up to the 30s and 40s, every year it just got lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. So can you imagine 5 years from now what that's going to be? 10 years from now? If we sit in our pews and we act like everything is going good, that will be 100% before long. We have a job to do. Dads, do you stink? Are you fighting for your families? Do you care enough to get in the trenches with them and fight for every ounce of Jesus you can put in their life? I hope so. See, we need fathers who stink. We need fathers who will lead, and fathers who will share the gospel, and fathers who will shepherd their home and point everything back to Jesus Christ. We need fathers who will fight. We need fathers who will deal with every situation based on the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're talking about eternity for your kids. You know what a shepherd is? A shepherd is a warrior. A shepherd fights for his people. When Jesus came as the good shepherd, he said the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I wonder, family pastors, are you leading the fight? Are you leading the way? I want you to know that Satan and the host of darkness and the principalities and the powers and everything that he can gather up is coming after your children. It stands true. I have watched it for 18 years, kids coming in the youth group and leaving. 18 years of watching them and 18 years of breaking my heart because I know that I can look every time when a dad is not involved in their life, I would say 90% of the time. That kid, about 15, 16 years old, walks out and goes, I still believe in God, but because no one's teaching, no one's guiding, no one's loving. I remember what a lady told me one time. We were talking about kids coming in and out of DHS. And my question to her was this. If you had a choice between father and mother, who would you put that kid with, the father or the mother, given that the same situation, they were both good parents? Her reply was simple. The dad. Every single time, especially when it was a girl. Every single time. That's nothing against you moms. Y'all are great. But dads, there's a special place in kids' hearts that they will follow what their dad does. I've got two of them running around my house that Melissa reminds me constantly. Herman, you know they're paying attention to you. They hang on every word that you say. Grandparents, they hang on every word that you say. They're watching everything that you do. Are you paying attention to them? Do you stink? Are you avoiding the subjects and you walking away going, that's just too hard? I hope you stink. We must be willing to be men that will lead and set the priorities in our family for the sake of the gospel. We must be men who will labor in prayer with calluses on our knees because we understand what is at stake, heaven and hell, eternity. Men, don't get lulled into the sleep of the middle-class lifestyle that so many of us are comfortable with, thinking that our kids they're going to college and everything's going to be perfect. They're going to run off to college and life's going to be good. Because it doesn't matter to go to college. All that stuff, world, yeah, that is. But if they gain the whole world and they forfeit their soul, have you accomplished anything? It's warfare. Bo, if you want to go ahead and come up. Dads, do you act like that? Do you act like it's warfare every single day? It is. Fathers, shepherds, household pastors, do you stink? Have you invested enough in your flock that God has given you that they can bear when the devil attacks? Have you given them what they need? Have you fought for them? You know, honestly, I thought about giving a Father's Day sermon that was, build everybody up and make everybody excited and feel good about themselves. But it wasn't on my heart. Because I'm looking at kids that are probably going to go to hell one day. Because we have dads that have phoned it in for far too long. I realize that this hurts because it hurts me. I'm preaching to myself. This was a constant reminder this week that, Herman, you're not done. You have a job to do. And some of you moms, I'm sorry. You have a job to do as well. Because you're the only one there. Church, we have a job to do. Surround the moms, surround the fathers, and preach and teach the gospel and help in every way we can. That's our job. And pray for these kids. Pray for these young families. Because it is a daily struggle to get them to understand the gospel of Jesus Christ. They have so much more stuff piling into their lives. I mean, think about it. You're adults and you're on your phone just like they are. You're able to filter. They do not. I have countless examples of that in my own life. We're at warfare. Dads, fathers, mothers, church. We're in the best place. We have a church that loves kids, and we have a church that loves families. But I promise you, no matter how much this church does, it will start at home every single time, and it will end at your home. Are you willing to battle? Are you willing to stand up and say, I will stand right beside you and I will give you everything I have to help your kid? To help your kid. Are you willing to do that? My challenge is simple, dads. Keep fighting. Keep praying. Keep chasing after the gospel. And if you're not doing that, start doing that, because it matters more than anything that you can ever give your child. You can give them everything in the world, but if they don't have Jesus, they have nothing. Remember that when you go to bed at night, when you're laying there and you're looking at your child and you're going, how much I love them. Do you love them enough to tell them about the gospel, to fight for them, to make sure they're in church every single Sunday, learning and growing to grow closer to God? Are you willing to fight for that? Or are we just going to give in and say, do what you need to do, world? I'm going to fight for my kids. Every single day. I hope you will fight with me. I hope when you walk out of this building that you sense, I've got a job to do, and it's my responsibility. Grandparents, you're not off the hook. Until the day you die, you have a job to do. Sometimes you may be the only Jesus that they get to see. Church, fight. Because I want in 20 years, best to be able to look back and go, this new generation loves Jesus more than any generation before it. You can see the fire and just the excitement in their lives. Don't leave them hanging. That's your job. Love them, guys. Would y'all please stand with me?